Indian time. We're going to wait a few minutes to get started, so you guys relax. The restrooms are back there in the back in case you need to rest. Go ahead and start if you want to. Siyo to God. Whoa. Kevin Stretch Dawado. Skasti Jaligiganti. Tahlequah Janela. Desoya de Giga. Galilega Jigadoha. Jigata Woj. Hello, my name is Kevin Stretch. I live in Tahlequah. I was raised in Fort Gibson, and I'm glad to be here. And I took a shower today. So, what the? Thank you so much for coming today. I would like to introduce the first speaker, Kalyn Fay Barnoski, a Cherokee enrollee and Muscogee Creek descent, and an interdisciplinary artist, musician, curator, educator from Oklahoma. Centering Indigenous and decolonial methodologies, her work focuses on self-location, community building, collaboration, and empathy using music, publication, storytelling, and contemporary craft. In every endeavor, she seeks ways in which we all intersect and to build bridges of understanding between. Her practice is for you, for me, for us, for we. Kalyn holds an M.F.A. from the University of Arkansas, an M.A. from the University of Tulsa, and a B.F.A. from Rogers State University. Kalyn has worked with the Peabody Essex Museum, Philbrook Museum of Art, Gilchrist Museum, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, the Momentary, the Edelgeorge Museum, along with others, and performed, exhibited, and facilitated workshops both nationally and internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, Kalyn Barnoski.
Sio Nagan Kalyn Fay Hi, my name is Kalyn Fay Barnoski. Welcome to my stand-up comedy hour. I'm really glad for you all to be here today. Let's see how it goes. I'm just kidding. Today I am going to talk about, well, first of all, I should probably introduce myself beyond that. I'm Cherokee and Muscogee Creek. My family are from the Bunch community and the Vian communities. That's just for you. Yeah, thank you. And I grew up in and around Oklahoma, between Tahlequah, Okemah, Claremore, and now Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I reside. So as Kevin said, I'm a songwriter, musician, artist, educator, and a curator, but today's talk is not about me. I will say they gave me the prompt of Native American art and perspectives, and I don't know if you know much about Native American art. There's a lot of it for a long time. And there's a lot to be talked about that I could not put in one talk. So I like giving myself a little box. It helps me move forward. So we're going to talk about the work of Jeffrey Gibson, along with some other work that comes from the collection that we house in the museum that I work at, called Philbrook Museum of Art. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you all about Cherokee art and its numerous ways of being understood, how it connects with this collection that I work with at Philbrook, and how it connects with our community. So I want to talk to you all about radical love as a transformational tool for community and the work of Jeffrey Gibson, specifically highlighting his multimedia sculpture from 2014, Eternal Return, which is up behind me. Cool. So first I want to talk about the artist himself, Jeffrey Gibson. He's a Cherokee and Mississippi Choctaw transdisciplinary artist living and working in Hudson Valley in New York. Though Gibson's mother was from the Briggs community of Oklahoma and their father was a Choctaw community member in Mississippi, Gibson grew up in a military family traveling, often overseas to foreign countries. One notable stationing was in South Korea, which the artist considers an apex of his formative younger years, and which Gibson points to frequently in interviews and conversations about his work. I'm going to move this back. During his time in South Korea, Gibson says he found himself entrenched in the present. Because he could not speak the language and was not accustomed to the culture, he became acutely aware of his visual, auditory, and tactile surroundings within the country. His ability to observe allowed him to find new ways to listen and understand the social currency of an area and new ways to communicate through encapsulating a specific moment in time. This is also where he often references his first time going out to dance clubs, an influence he uses contemporarily through the aesthetics of rave culture. I want to be there right now. AC. But it's not just rave culture that this artist references. There's multiplicity in their work. In Gibson's objects, he references many aspects of their identity simultaneously, embracing queer histories and native histories through their joyful, playful, and layered visual language. This piece behind me is To Say I Love You Right Out Loud. And as we see that layered, nuanced visual language in this piece, Eternal Return, we can see Gibson's reference of native visual culture through powwow experiences. The regalia, the intertribal intermingling, the beadwork, the vivid colors and patterns, the tin cones used for jingle dresses, and pretty much every tactile element in this piece can be referenced back to the powwow experience. And for those of you who might not know what a powwow is, I assume everyone here does. You all come from this area. We're a Cherokee national holiday, and we exist in Oklahoma with 39 affiliated tribes. But it's an intertribal gathering where we come together to celebrate and honor our nations and ancestors through shared dance, song, and food. But what I would like to turn our focus to here is eternal return in the figure enveloped like this regalia-like covering. What you wear is so important if you are participating in the dances. For most participants, the regalia is made intentionally and thoughtfully. It's created specifically for the wearer as a garment of protection and is full of prayers by the maker. Just as intention and meditation is embedded into each braid of sweetgrass, so is some regalia. And we can see how Gibson has interwoven these ideas of intention and protection in this piece. The figure is protected by this sort of armor, an armor of beads and jingles and bold patterns and colors. But unlike some of the armors that are solely for protecting the wearer, this one celebrates not only the wearer, but a whole community of people who participated in its making. When I see eternal return, I also think on the act of beading and the investment of time that beading takes. As someone who recently took up beading again in the past few years, I can say it takes up a lot of time on my own time. A small rosette, when I first started, would take me hours, and not without many finger pricks and blisters along the way. So I have to be so intentional and focused while I was doing it, otherwise I would lose count or I'd lose my way through it, and nobody likes loose beadwork. I often think on something that artist Molly Murphy Adams said. She's of Oglala Lakota descent. And she said in a panel talk a few years ago at Gilcrease Museum. She shared that the process of beading was an act of joyful protest for our ancestors. And when someone asked her to expound upon that, she shared that in a time of forceful relocation, in a time of genocide of our peoples, our ancestors were still making time to create something that was for nothing other than to illuminate that they could thrive in the face of seemingly insurmountable despair. That we still gave ourselves the luxury of time to make something beautiful, even amidst these painful and difficult moments. So when I see the complexity and the multiplicity of Gibson's work, I'm drawn to a similar narrative. These works are a way of sharing with others contemporarily, and a way to echo into our collective future that Native people are not only still here, which is a regressive conversation, but thrive in the face of adversity. The work gives hope that we are able to defiantly create, explore, and envision. And I think Gibson's work is not solely centered on their experiences as a Native person, but also on the intersections of their identity of being Native and being a queer person, the experiences they have shared and the freedom they have found in that community, as well as the community they have helped foster for other Native queer people. And at the heart of their dance club, rave aesthetics, and is his love and appreciation for the queer community and those spaces that fostered him. In these spaces, one can allow themselves to freely display themselves as who they are, who they imagine themselves to be. And I feel as though their work, though deeply embedded in Native culture, still shares an exuberance through its aesthetics. Bright and flashy, some could call it extra. Regardless, it carves out a space, and it does it boldly and unapologetically. And not every moment of the Indigenous queer experience is filled with flair and unabashed self-love. It can be difficult at many times. Gibson has frequently described himself as feeling like a punching bag in regards to his identities in the art world, as someone who moves between a Eurocentric art world and a traditional community. And we see that literally taking shape in this beaded and adorned punching bag behind me called Last Night, a DJ Saved My Life. But we can also see how the artist upends that with his use of bright colors, materiality, and his use of pop song lyrics. These lyrics we can all attach ourselves to offer relatability across people groups, and can transform a piece into something to dig deeper into. Lyrics like Depeche Mode, All I Ever Wanted, All I Ever Needed, Joni Mitchell's To Say I Love You Right Out Loud, Gladys Knight's I've Got to Use My Imagination, DJ Larry Heard's dance club hit, Can You Feel It, and so many more. We can also see how this changes the conception of eternal return and many of the works from his Like a Hammer exhibition, where the figure of eternal return originated. The figures that seem to mimic Kachina dolls by the Hopi Pueblo and Dene people. And if you don't know what a Kachina doll is, it's traditionally carved from cottonwood and represents various spirits. But these share a similar attribute, and that's that all of these figures that Gibson has created are faceless. And Gibson did this purposefully. He said he chose to leave the figures vague because he wanted these figures to remain genderless. And I can't help but think of the idea of protection and armor I mentioned earlier. The history of abuse in the queer community and how one might protect themselves using this sort of armor. But also, on the other hand, how it upends that history and focuses on a vibrant display where gender and sexuality don't have to be the bifurcation where people veer away from each other, but can be a space where we take time to acknowledge and learn, even celebrate our differences as well as our intersections. So in the catalog for Gibson's exhibition, Like a Hammer, from which Eternal Return first was exhibited, there's a quote from Rebecca Solnit from her book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost. And it reads, "The things we want are transformative, or only we think we know what is on the other side of that transformation. Love, wisdom, grace, inspiration. How do we go about finding these things that are in some ways about extending the boundaries of the self into unknown territory, about becoming someone else?" And I think that's the beauty of Gibson's adorned figures. Because of their genderless appearance, any of us can place ourselves into that figure. Any of us can place details into that figure that make it more relatable to us. Any of us can weave a story around this figure and the meanings of each bead, of each tassel, of the jingles. But even beyond these figures and structures, I look at work some people might not identify as native art, which brings me to the large monolithic structures he constructed out of fringe, which are on view behind me, for DeCordova Sculpture Park in Massachusetts. Seemingly sturdy structures, they are actually made of soft individual fibers that move and react to a passerby. Pulling from the language of regalia, they remind me of women's shawl dancers with their vivid colors and ability to morph and change with the movement of the wearer. And looking at these structures, we think we know what the object is, that it's a fixed thing. But then we are able to see the possibilities of it once we interact with it. It's almost reminiscent of water to me. Water can be interrupted and moved, but it is bound by the vessel. So what happens when we change that vessel? What is water without a vessel? And it's objects like these that allow us to imagine beyond our own understandings because there's so many possibilities within it. None of us really know what the transformation could bring if we allow ourselves to extend and expand the boundaries of what we already know. It shapes and morphs into something we're all just trying to figure out together. And that is the fun of it. We're all just sort of making it up as we go and allowing ourselves the grace to make mistakes, to experiment, to grow alongside one another. And society tends to look down on the unknown, what isn't visible upon first glance, what hasn't been done before. But I believe there's so much opportunity in the unknown. There are hopes and dreams in the undefined aspects of transformation. And I love that Gibson chooses to continue to work in that realm, where nothing is fixed, but everything is allowed to be changed, moved, interrupted, and transformed. So, what does love got to do with it? Rebecca Solnit mentioned in her quote of love being on the other side of transformation. And it's taken me a minute to get here, but we finally made it back to the point. The real question today is, what's love got to do with this? And I've spent this talk so far declaring my own love of Gibson's artwork, but we have really only touched on radical love and its transformational qualities in the artwork, just a little baby bit. So let's move forward. I have to say, love seems to be the primer of most, if not all, of Gibson's work. And I don't mean it in a sort of romantic, saccharine way. I mean the deep, abiding love one has for their family, their friends, and their community. I mean the kind of love that when there is no path in, when there is no seat at the table, Someone carves out a path and a space for the people who come next. They build their own table. And that seems like a lot, but I truly believe that's what Gibson is using their work for. What's at the heart of it? Radical love. We see that carving out an assertion in this sculpture titled, "Because once you enter my house, it becomes our house." A large-scale outdoor sculpture that references Cahokia, one of the largest Mississippian cities of trade in the 13th century. And in this space, the artist brought in multiple performance artists to sort of activate this sculpture to be included in programming around this piece. But radical love comes as no surprise. As an Indigenous person, as a Native person, I think constantly on how we honor those who come before us and how we honor those who will come after us with what we do presently. The responsibility we have to one another. And the answer I always come to is love. I think about Gibson's work that he presented at Times Square a few years ago titled, "She Never Dances Alone," which I'm gonna play on the screen behind me really quickly, probably only a minute's worth, just so you know. It's a video piece that used 60 screens across Times Square, incorporating a song by a tribe called Red, performed by Sarah Ortegon, who is an acclaimed jingle dress dancer. So I'm gonna have him play the video for just like a minute.
DJ Buddha Blaze. You know, electric powwow is going on tonight. That's right, a tribe called Red. Are you going to check them out? Give me a call. Let me know. Let's get into the latest from nation to nation. This is Sisters.
So, oh, thank you so much. I made that myself. The jingle dress dance originated with the Ojibwe and is traditionally performed by women for healing, protection, and strength. Oh, that is. Sorry about that. Jingle dresses were a response to the influenza of the 1920s, which wreaked havoc on the tribe. And each cone was traditionally a tobacco tin lid that was rolled and attached to the dress. But back to the video, just imagine this, all over 60 screens in Times Square. Even in my lifetime, I would have never expected Native culture to permeate such a space. Even the title itself offers us a way in. She never dances alone. So that implies, do we dance with her? Do we all dance together? Gibson using this space to bring in others with music and dance on such a prominent platform gives others the ability to dream of a future where they too can see themselves and their understanding of the world platformed in such a visible space like Times Square. I will have a little caveat that Times Square and having this on all the videos is not the pinnacle of success. There are a lot of ways to see success happen. But radically loving others can look like platforming and carving out a space for others when you have the tools and the means, but your community might not. And this isn't the only work that Gibson has collaborated on. In fact, they use it as a huge part of their practice. They've worked with many people in their communities, including Laura Ortman, Damien Dinyazi, Black Belt Eagle Scout, to name a few. Native activists, musicians, writers, artists. He tries to incorporate so many different facets of makers so that there's equity within the art and practice. And to lean into the knowledge of others is how he even began incorporating Indigenous craft into their work. He learned from elders and culture keepers. When he didn't know how to do something, he reached out and they were quick to support and help. Radical love can look like collaborative and shared knowledge that gets passed down over generations. I think that was this one. Oopsie. It's not just passing down knowledge either, but recognizing where you come from. So my dad, who is also Chalagi and Muskogee, tells me all the time to remember where I come from. And sometimes he says it jokingly and in passing, but I think it is a really important sentiment. Giving credit to those who came before and recognizing the path they laid down for you to get where you are is an integral part of honoring our ancestors. But this doesn't just have to be through what we say, it can also be through what we do or what we create, even an art object. Many artists reference back to the inspiration from others, but there's definitely this sort of Eurocentric norm of individualism. We got the idea that we got here on the hard work and ingenuity of just ourselves. But I don't think that's true. Jeffrey Gibson not only implements ways and frameworks for making that have been laid down before him, but references them and thanks his predecessors in interviews and talks. Of the many artists and makers, two of those are Oscar Howe and Dick West. We can see the geometric way in which Howe and West are working to create a visual language that steers away from the expected native aesthetic that people came to demand from native artists. And we can see where Gibson references these forms in his rawhide paintings. There's even an infamous letter to Philbrook, where I work, from Oscar Howe, who was a Dakota artist of the 20th century, about this preconceived notion of how native art should look after he was denied recognition in the Indian Annual, which was a juried competition at Philbrook that ran for about 50 years. And in this letter, Oscar Howe states that the institution is holding Native people in chains and that we should have the autonomy to define what art is for us and what it should look like. And it's been something that I continue to reference as I move and grow my own practice. So when I see Gibson's work, I see Danae weaving patterns. I see Maria Martinez, San Ildefonso pottery artist, her geometry and patterning. I see Datsolali's basket, who is a Washoe basket weaver. I see Ojibwe beading and more geometry, and so much more. So we can see that Gibson is not entirely new in his endeavors or in his visual language, but he is pulling from these other Native artists intertribally who built pathways and this language for him to try to find ways in which they can all be interwoven together to create something really spectacular. So radical love can look like honoring and naming those that came before you. In Gibson's work, we also see how so many ideas can come together in one object, and how the object can be a space to imagine and to hope, but also a space to ask hard questions. And this makes me think of a story about the late and great Eastern Band Cherokee basket weaver Shan Gosshorn, who was one of my mentors through school and is coincidentally also in the Philbrook collection, which makes me really excited. And she passed away a few years ago in 2019. But she made intricate baskets made of paper that had powerful images printed on them. These baskets were double-walled, so the images also continued to the interior. These images included, text pulled from broken treaties, boarding schools, matriarchs, and more. And some of these were really heavy topics for people, especially people who might not have experienced Native art before then. So when someone asked her why she chose to make these complicated subjects into these baskets and why they moved into the interior, her answer was, it's easier to receive a hard message when you've already leaned into something. And that has stuck with me for many years. So what is the lean in for people? What can be the lean in if we are using art as a way to intervene with these preconceived understandings of what Native art has to be or what we expect Native art to be? And I see Gibson's lean in as being these really enticing, attractive, almost seducing objects that are seemingly just playful and exciting to look at. But when we dig deeper, we realize there's a layered history of both tragedy and beauty and joy. There's something really important about creating art objects where people feel comfortable and have the space to explore in multiplicity. And what I mean when I say that is I think humans really do compartmentalize. It's part of our nature to get through life in many ways. But really, we're all just experiencing a lot of things all at once, and we are all a lot of things all at once. I don't know any Native person who isn't a beater, a weaver, a chef, a forager, an artist of some sort. You're also a mother, a daughter, an auntie, a sister, cousin. And when we recognize that we do contain these multitudes, recognizing that there's rarely a binary, a black and a white, or a one and another, but that we are having these shared experiences is really important in how we can empathize with one another. If we make these connections with one another, if we can do that through art, there's so much hope for us as a people. So creating objects and performances where people can simultaneously be critically questioning and be joyful and celebratory are ways Gibson creates a framework for radical love. So, I've been talking for quite a bit about how Gibson uses his work to create objects, experiences, and frameworks for radical love. But I wanted to share why it's important and how it is transformational for community. I'll return to the quote once more by Solnit. The things we want are transformative, or only we think we know what is on the other side of that transformation. Love, wisdom, grace, inspiration. How do we go about finding these things that are in some ways about extending the boundaries of the self into unknown territory, about becoming someone else? Well, radical love is transformational, simply because it asks us to lay down the notions of who we believe ourselves to be and who we believe each other are. And it asks us to remove the boxes and borders we build, allowing us to imagine and hope and dream together, including about what Native art can be and what Native art can look like. I believe Jeffrey Gibson creates his work using radical love as a transformational tool for community, and I feel like that's present in the work that you see in front of you right now. So, that's my talk about radical love. What-o. I will take questions if you have any questions. This was sort of a rambling talk, but it happened. Great. Yes. Yeah. The picture of him? Oh, let's see. This one. Yeah, it's kind of hard to read, but it says to say I love you right out loud. Yeah. Happy to show it some more. Yeah.
You have it. Is it the piece you have at Philbrook is the first one that you showed, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So could you talk about how you feel Jeffrey's reception or effect on, because Jeffrey was the Venice Biennale
Yes.
pick this year from the U.S. Pavilion, which is like complicated and crazy and like feels like a fever dream a little bit.
Definitely.
Feels like maybe we'll never have a Native artist there again. Like, how do you feel like how have you received that, or how do you feel like that's affected the larger art world?
It's a good question. There's some like really positive and really negative effects of this, which is when a Native artist becomes really popular and really well known, people tend to believe that this is the way in which Native people make artwork, and that's it as well. Just like I was just talking about, sort of historical or traditional ways of making. Now this is the new expectation. And we are all making different types of work. So this has become popularized in a way that I don't feel like always allows other Native artists who are making work beyond this to enter in at times. And so I think that would probably be the negative effect. The positive effect is the most minimal, which is that we have some sort of platform, that we are visible to a larger art world that we aren't always privy to and that we aren't always included in. And we have had to continually make our own secondary art canon. So there is an intersection, which I feel is wonderful, but yeah. Any other questions? Great. I love not answering questions. If you do want to talk, I'll be here afterwards. Please come say hi. Love giving hugs and handshakes like a politician. Thanks for having me. I'm Kalyn Fay Barnoski. Stick around for more Cherokee talks.